Welcome back to the program. Glad you're with us. My name is Dr. Sock, and this is Fresh Air in the Morning right here on Island 92 in Z 105.1 FM. It is, let's see, 8:17. Please join me in saying good morning to our managing editor of Korea Broadcasting Network News and the host of St. Martin Insights News that matters to you, Emil Lee. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Sock. Good morning, listeners. Great to be here again.
Glad you're with us this morning. So yesterday was Council of Ministers press briefing. What transpired?
Oh, a lot happened yesterday, actually. I was the only journalist there, and I have to say, I love when I'm the only one there
I love it.
because you can almost get into a dialogue conversation, right?
Yeah.
So when there's other journalists there, you have to like ask your question, and then you get one or two others asking their questions. So now you can sort of break up your questions into pieces, and so it I find it makes it more interactive and more interesting. So yesterday, ministries of Romy, Education, and VSA showed up. So they did their presentation. So I'm just going to hit a couple of the highlights from their presentation and then go into my questions that I asked them. So, garbage collection, apparently Parcel 5, which is in town down to the Jose Lake ball field. The company that was contracted to do the cleanup apparently hasn't been doing a good job, and so that contract's been pulled and it's been given to another company. So it's kind of interesting how the process went because the number two contractor apparently was Meadowlands,
Hmm.
but they're already doing two parcels, so they've sort of decided no, you're not going to give it to them, and they gave it to All Waste in Place, is another company. Um, so it's kind of interesting how that happened, and I have some questions about it. So I will follow up about that in the future press briefings because if I remember, All Waste in Place is related to one of the people in their party, and so you wonder how that process went, if it was correct, and if Meadowlands was in agreement with it, for example.
Right. I mean, I will tell you that I have personally observed a tremendous slowdown in the collection of waste, household waste.
Cleaning, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I they used to come like clockwork every day
Hmm.
through Simpson Bay, and now maybe um, once or maybe twice a week, 3 times a
And
week.
and do you have guys on the road that like walk the street and kind of pick up bottles and trash and stuff like that in your neighborhood?
We do, but they are not regularly
Hmm.
doing that.
I'll have to say, in my area, I see the guys out on the road cleaning,
Mhm.
and it's really frustrating because you see it in a few days. People just keep on throwing stuff out the windows.
Right.
I don't know what's wrong with people. I mean, I just can't imagine, driving and throwing my Coke can out the window when I'm done with it. It just is mind-boggling to me that people even do that nowadays. So,
Yeah, it blows my mind, and um, uh, what troubles me more than anything is if we're supposed to send people through, weekly or a couple times a week to clean
mhm.
or pick up the trash, every day, and they aren't, well, what are we paying for, right? What are our tax dollars doing? And that I find that very troublesome, very troublesome. Coupled with the fact that I had a lady in my neighborhood decide that the government provided um, bin um, was hers, and she pulled it into her yard. And of course, I tried to call Rami and request another bin for the end of my street. Because it won't come all the way down my lane, my small little street. I have to the pail goes at the end of the street, and you put your trash out, right? And the one of my neighbors decided that she didn't like having the pail out, or me putting trash in the pail. Not that I have anything more than any other normal household, and so she pulled it into her yard. I asked for another one, couldn't get anybody on the phone to ask, right? The phone just rang and
Right,
rang
right,
and rang,
right,
and so I finally just went and bought a pail and put it at the end of the street, and now she she puts the one that she took in her yard out when she decides that she needs to put it out. But now the pail that I put out there, everybody else fills up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's
So,
like,
so you're gonna pull your pail into your yard also.
well, you know what, it I I don't if I don't put it at the end of the street, right, then the trash will just get left there. So I feel like it's better to leave it. I almost want to just get another pail, leave two of them out there,
Exactly.
because I can't rely on the government to do its job, to come pick the stuff up, and better that it should be in a pail
Just
than just blowing down the road.
exactly. If
But
they're in bags.
it's very troublesome.
Yeah. So one of the things actually that the Ministry of Romy also talked about is apparently they're working on a waste authority ordinance. And apparently they've chosen a subcontractor, so I assume that means they've hired a legal firm to write the ordinance. But I didn't have a chance to ask about it. But what I miss is Vromi explaining what the vision is. Right? You're going to ask for somebody to help you draft an ordinance, but yet I haven't seen the public discussion or transparency in terms of what that vision is. So, for example, in the past, there's been discussions about a waste to energy plant at the dump. There's been discussions about incineration. So, what's the vision? Is it a heavy recycling process that from now on all garbage that goes to the dump is going to get sorted, or is it a incineration, some sort of a fire, some sort of a plant there, right? And are you going to generate electricity from it? So I wish, and I will follow up and ask Romy, before you go and draft this whole ordinance, what's the vision? What's the big idea?
I mean, to be honest, I given the small environment that we're in, it would seem to me that the only real solution is to try to incinerate, in the most environmentally friendly way possible, trash, and to turn that the energy that is produced from that incineration into energy.
And I will say, San Martin is typically late in doing many of these things, right? Many other countries. So the good thing about being late is that others have already figured this out. I mean, you don't need to be the pioneer in this. You don't need to take on any sort of experimental processes. You can look to others to see what they've done. And indeed, you've seen it in many of the Northern European countries. They've gone to some sort of a waste to energy, incineration, combining, producing electricity, etc. But some of those countries are already running into problems that they've actually processed much of their garbage and actually need to import in order to feed those machines. So what's the right size? And all of this is going to impact what the total cost of your waste management is, and therefore I would imagine impacts the ordinance that you're going to draft. So I wish there was a little bit more transparency and discussion about what's the vision before you went and drafted the ordinance. But again, that's something that I'm going to bring up in future press conferences. Education was there as well, talking about how, there was a big discussion in the past about how local contractors weren't getting into some of the projects that were being funded in the reconstruction of school projects, and the NRPB pulled back some contracts, and now apparently there's one contract and there was only one company that bid, and it was not a local company. So I'm kind of confused about why the local companies made such an issue about it, but then in the end didn't bid. So
well, you're talking about, and this was published the other day too, and I read the article. It was all about, this is the Marie Lawrence school out in Middle Region,
correct,
and how there was only one bidder. And so I read the article, and I'm like, it was horribly confusing. Okay, so there's only one person that bid. So was the number in line with what you were looking to spend? Then they alluded to the fact that they sent it out to be tendered, and in other words, rebid. And
well, they rebid.
I
She
don't
didn't say
know.
that.
I read something where it said that they were going to then go through a retendering process. So I wasn't sure what that meant.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, because
So,
it just because this has been, come on. I'm sorry, people. Hurricane Irma was 2017. It's
hmm
2025.
right,
Could we please get our acts together and
right,
move this
right,
forward?
right.
Because guess who's suffering here? Our kids.
Exactly. Those kids from Sister Marie Lawrence have been absorbed in the other Catholic schools, and indeed, it puts extra pressure on those other schools. So absolutely.
And I think what they tried to do is absorb them into two other schools, but kind of keep the school separate in the other schools. Is what I,
Yes.
is what I
Yes.
what was my understanding. And come on, come on. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. It's going to be 8 years.
And you haven't even started.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah.
And by the way, there's tons of the private money that's lined up to help turn. We have a huge Rotary grant from Rotary International that has been sitting there waiting to help, um, you know, take Sister Marie Lawrence School and turn it into a school of excellence with training for the teachers and equipment and all kinds of good stuff. And guess what's going to happen if we don't use those money
Yeah.
soon?
You're going to reallocate those
They're
funds.
going to reallocate it to somebody else
Exactly.
because we're snoozing. We're
Exactly.
snoozing.
Exactly. So I'm hitting the highlights. There was a lot more talked about, but a lot of
Let,
it's covered. Yeah.
let me do this. It's 8:28. Right here in the Northeast Caribbean. We'll take a quick break. Take care of the Amstel Bright Entertainment Calendar. Amstel Bright Entertainment Calendar brought to you by Amstel Bright Island 92 and Z 105.1 FM. And a big thank you to everybody at Divico because they've been playing us every time I've been in Divico. Last two times they've had us on the air.
Nice.
So good morning to everybody who's shopping. And by the way, Amstel Bright distributed locally by Divico. Here's everything that's happening tonight. Welcome back to the program 832 as we work our way through the program together. My dear friend Emil Lee is in St. Martin Insights news that matters to you. So Rami was there. We talked about trash.
Yes.
Who else was there?
So VSR was there. Education was there.
So VSI is your old
My old ministry, yeah,
which is health, labor,
and social development, social affairs. Yeah. So, one of the things that the minister of VSI talked about is that there's this amount that's being paid by SZV for health care for undocumented people on the island. 2001, 1.8 million guilders. 2022, 2.6 million. 2023, 4 million. 2024, 5.6 million. And so, this is sort of a funny number, and he needs to explain a bit more.
It seems like how much again? Tell me.
1.8, 2.6, 4, and 5.6. So it's increasing.
That's a lot. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. But, you need to be. So first of all, as I understand it, if there's medical services that need to be emergency services that need to be done for an undocumented person that needs to be paid, it's actually government's expense to pay it. So I think SZV is paying it on behalf of government. And so this actually leads into my follow-up question is that a couple weeks ago, he answered a question that I asked several months ago about the debt that SZV is owed by government, which is in excess of 69 million guilders. And then he added 40-something, but I think he mixed it up. But anyways, let's say around between 70 to 100 million guilders that government owes SZV. And SZV, keep in mind, is an insurance company, right? So government owes between 70 to 100 million guilders to SZV. They're not paying SZV any interest on it, and the amount that's owed is not budgeted anywhere in any terms of a repayment plan. So I said, look, you announced this last week that there's no plan to pay and no interest being paid. Normally, the way an insurance company works is that money, if they're not spending it, would be invested, right? And that profit on their investments would be used to make the insurance company financially more stable, and they're losing that. So they're losing the money. If that money was in their account, they would be investing it and making interest on that money. So they're losing that interest.
Right.
Right. And it's creating a financial problem. So they're liquidating investments that they've made in order to fund expenses that they're making that they haven't actually been paid for, right?
I mean, what they should do is take the amount that's owed by the government to SZV and create a loan with payments, right? And a portion of that is the return of the principal, and the other portion is interest, right? And the principal, as it is returned, gets set aside into some sort of capital sinking fund for future, and the interest you can use to fund current obligations.
And so for those, to
common business sense.
Yeah, to go back further, if you remember the building where the government currently is now, the new government building, right, was owned by government. So this was during my tenure when I was a minister. So the building was owned by government. It wasn't finished. As part of a debt settlement with SZV, government gave that building to SZV. SZV had to put in a little bit of money to finish the building, and now government rents the building from SZV, right?
So they pay the rent?
I think they are paying the rent, yes. So, but I mean, just to show the amount of money that government owes, they had to give them that building to pay the debt, and the debt is still now climbing.
So in other words,
between 70 to 100 million.
So the building satisfied some of the debt.
Correct. But that debt keeps on increasing because you're not managing your expenses correctly. Your whole healthcare program, right?
Sounds like the people that are running this are also running GB.
and his
no offense to anybody.
His answer is, we're going to fix this with the tourism tax. You remember they're talking about this tourism tax, and the plan is that they're going to allocate all of that money to actually pay for health care, this and satisfy this debt, I guess. But I have a problem with that because this is actually money that you as government owe. And now you're taking your debt and actually passing it on to, as a future tax. I think that's unfair, and I have my issues with the whole tourism tax to begin with. So
I think having making it any more expensive for anyone to visit our island when our primary industry is making smiles and memories, tourism, is a supremely bad idea.
and
Not to use another analogy
and to try and put this into context
or adjective.
for our listeners, imagine if you go to um, Carrefour, right?
Mhm.
And Carrefour says, from now, make it easy for people to come. And then when they're here, make sure they have a great experience and make sure that they leave as much of their money behind as possible in our hotels, our restaurants, our supermarkets, our retail shops, our whatever. So everything that makes it more complicated to come is a barrier. I mean,
Mhm.
look, there's a whole discussion right now about the United States, right? Where Trump is talking about putting that if you're going to get a visa, that he
Mhm.
wants you to leave a deposit. I think it was
Some
a
big
ridiculous amount, like
right, right.
$10,000, $15,000
Depending on
security deposit or something.
depending on which country you were from.
Right. So, but people are saying, well, I'm just not going to go.
Right,
I'll go to Canada instead. I'll go somewhere else
right.
because you're just raising the barrier to travel. You're making it clear that actually in the end you don't really want me. So I have my issues with that, but that's a separate discussion. But the fact that government isn't even thinking about how to repay it other than we're going to create a new tax and allocate that revenue to pay for it is mind-boggling to me. I also asked him about Cost Pro. I've met some of the old workers. There was a supermarket that was in Madam Estates,
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
across from where the bowling alley used to be, right? So that place closed down.
When?
Oh, a few months ago, and I've
Oh.
run into some of the workers from there.
Mhm.
They're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't been paid. I owed wages. I owed my severance pay," and in the end, I think because it was more locally, I think the ownership or the management was more local. I haven't heard anything about it in the newspaper. If it was another shop, I have a feeling it'd be all over the place and talking about it. And so I asked, I said, are you aware of it and are you looking into it? And he says, indeed they are. But it's funny how it's very hush hush, it seems, like it doesn't get picked up anywhere. The fact is that they totally screwed the workers. So.
Mm.
Labor regulations, there was a discussion last week with the Ministry of Justice about inmates when they come out. And so I asked the Minister of VSA, are inmates who are looking to reintegrate into society as they come out subject to the same labor laws? So indeed, he says they are. And so I can understand that employers are going to be more reluctant because our labor laws are very constrictive and makes it difficult to hire workers without getting into a permanent agreement, and then they worry about how do I manage that. And so I think indeed they needed to look at some sort of like almost like an internship type program or sponsored program. So he said indeed there is no special provision for that. Education asked about teacher placement. If you remember last year, they were talking about schools looking for a lot of teachers. She's basically not that aware and hasn't heard anything, which it's kind of scary. In the end, the Ministry of Justice, their ability to oversee the different schools is actually very limited. They really only have oversight over the public schools and not the subsidized schools. So all the Catholic schools, for example, they only have to provide financial statements. There's no discussion about curriculum, etc. So I've been asking about this. The schools have a program for mental health, right? So what they're really referring to is when there's a crisis. They're talking about crisis management, but there's nothing in their curriculum about teaching emotional intelligence. And as I start, as I talk with people in the community, you see that there's a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of children who don't know how to manage their feelings of frustration and anger, and you see it come out in discipline problems in the schools or rage on the streets or whatever. Right. She says, no, we basically are only focused on crisis management, where we haven't integrated that into our school curriculum, which is kind of scary. Um, Again, also, they are working on special needs, children who have some learning challenges. And I asked her, I said, okay, I understand that you're working on that, but you also have students that are gifted. You have
Hmm.
students who are excel in maybe music or arts or math or different subjects. Do you have any plans or provisions in your school for programs for gifted children? She said, and what surprised me was how quickly she said no. There's nothing there in the planning. She's talking about how they really just want to get the basics done correctly, that they're working on getting that straightened out. So that was really, I took that kind of hard, because it means that if you have a child who is in some way exceptional in terms of their abilities in school in one subject or another, that there's really no plan within the school system to
No advanced
nurture
placement.
that,
There's no, yeah.
and that's sad. That's sad. And in the end, I think that's why people, and I'm one of them, I've finally made the decision that, you know what, I'm going to take my child and put him in private school, where there are more opportunities for that type of support.
And you know, you're lucky that you have the resources to be able to do that. I would expect that our public school system should have some uh, some mechanism. I think it's just a normal thing in today's day and age that we have some mechanism to provide for those that learn differently, those that are differently abled. And differently abled, you know, is both sides of the spectrum. Those that
Makes
learn differently, and have require, you know, other, maybe some additional assistance in learning because the brain processes differently, and then those that are differently abled because they're exceptional and they learn faster than others.
exactly.
We need to have some way of managing that, as a civilized country. That's just normal stuff,
Absolutely.
and let's hope that we get there.
And so to hear that indeed there's actually no attention paid towards children who have a gift and a talent to nurture that was shocking to me, actually.
And you know, and when we say a gift or a talent, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, because like we have, where the Charlotte Brookston Academy, where
Hmm.
they focus on the
Arts.
the arts, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's great.
Right.
That's great, and that's one type of talent. But we have other types of talent where people are really gifted in science or math or English or history or some other, um, discipline, right? That is just part of the normal curriculum, and we should be able to handle those types of students and children that are differently abled because they excel faster than, you know, the norm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let me do this. It is 8:46. We'll take a quick commercial break, come back and do our last segment with Emil Lee. St. Martin Insights, news that matters to you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. Of course, St. Martin Insights news that matters to you, my good buddy Emil Lee, in with us. And so we haven't talked about GB.
Yeah, it wasn't in press yesterday, but indeed there's so much going on in the media
What
about
it was in the
GB.
and it's in the newspaper. There's a whole big press statement that was sent out by the supervisory board of directors of NBGB, entitled "Restoring Trust Requires Truth and Transparency." A statement from the NVGB supervisory board.
Right.
It's about 4 pages long.
So it's a paid advertorial, right? It's a one-way communication. There's no question answers.
Wait, and it was when they sent it out to all of the media,
Right.
right, as a statement.
Right.
Um,
And in the newspaper, I think they paid for it.
Paid for it to be published.
So I wish they would engage in conversation. I I understand that they're maybe afraid, but I think that just sending out statements is better than nothing. But indeed, I think there needs to be a conversation, because as we were talking off air about the fact that in their statement it doesn't. We still know people who have problems with billing. That's not sorted out. They say it's sorted out.
Right.
Right.
Listen, I know, and I'm not speaking out of school, or because Herb talked about this publicly. He had an issue at his home. He had one of the new smart meters installed, and then all of a sudden he went home. Every bill that he has received, he has paid, going back, for forever. And he went home and said, "My power's cut off." Just stopped, right?
Yeah.
With no communication, no nothing, right? Every bill he's been sent, he's paid.
Right.
And so we made some phone calls, and what we found out was that he had some old bills that he had never received them, right? They just were not sent. And it all goes back to the time of 2022 when they had their cyber attack. And so rather than simply, now they've figured this stuff out, right? They have it on their books as a past due bill. Well, rather than send him some notice, or when you get your invoice every month, it shows previous balance due, and here's the new balance, here's the total due. If they did that on their invoices, people would not be blindsided.
If I were GB, I would hire a team of, I don't know, a dozen people, come in and say, look, your only job is to reach out to consumers and go customer by customer.
There's not that many of them.
And figure out are your bills correct now, right? And if not, what's the issue? I mean, just bring in a team for however long it takes to make sure that everybody's happy, take the issue off the table.
So I had an instance not too long ago, and by the way, I want to say thank you as we're talking about you, because like Micheline Stephen, who is the head of commercial, I know she's out of medical leave, but Micheline has, even when she's out on medical leave, if I reach out to her, she calls me back.
Nice.
And whenever we've had an issue that's been brought to our attention, I've gone to her and she's helped get it sorted. But it shouldn't be just me that's able to do that. Everybody should be able to get things sorted. So I got, every month I get my bill for the radio and for the house. They usually come together. I pay them the day I get them, because I don't ever want to have issue. And one month, all of a sudden I got one for the house, but not one for the radio. And I finally got through, and they told me I had a credit on that account. And I said, okay, with all due respect, while I'd love to have a credit, that's not correct. I'm going to be I'm going to, live by the rotary four-way test. Is it the truth? And no, it's not the truth. There's no way that I have a credit, because here's every invoice for the last 6 months, where here's the invoice, here's the payment. Here's the invoice, here's the payment. Here's the invoice, here's the payment. They all match up. So something is not right. And it took about a month and a half, and they figured out that they had double posted a payment back in February on my account. I'd made a payment. They posted it not once but twice. So I had a credit. And that's why it wasn't a credit that I was legitimate. So, but I had to go through this whole exercise. And if I had been a
different kind of customer.
Yeah. not a good doobie, right? Maybe. That I would have just said, okay, fine, and
Yeah,
waited.
thank you. Yeah,
Thank you very much, and just walked the other way.
right.
So when you read the statement of, uh, that GB sent out, and they say restoring invoicing completed, status completed. Um, you know, uh, I'm sorry. Guess what? No, it's not completed. And there's two examples where things are still screwed up.
And the other thing it doesn't mention is, for example, the status of purchasing new generators,
Yeah,
right? Is that have
has it
they
been
been
done?
ordered? Is it in progress? What's the time frame?
When do
So
it? Because otherwise we're going to have the same problem down the road that the temporary power plant is going to start to have issues if we don't maintain it the way it's supposed to be maintained.
And I will say that it's predictable what's happening now. GB saying, look, we are in a financial bind. Um, of course, we'd love to be able to drop our rates for electricity and water, but in the end, we're not in a financial place that we can afford to do that. If you'd like to do that, government, we're happy to sort of share that burden. In other words, we'll contribute part, you contribute part. So it's really now sort of a hot potato issue. Government, how much money are you willing to put in to basically subsidize people's electricity bill?
Mhm.
And how much GB is willing to put in to subsidize people's electricity bill? Because, according to them, it isn't like there's a ton of profit and we can afford to just reduce our profit. No, it's going to come out of our pocket. So whose pocket is it going to come out of? And sadly, that's where the whole discussion seems to be going is I can't afford it. Government's going to say I can't afford it. So in the end, the people are the one who are going to have to find a way to afford it. So I'm going to make a suggestion, and I wish GB would listen.
Mhm.
The fact is that the fuel clause, I understand GB is supposed to have an electricity rate, right? But the big variable for them is, and it's beyond their control, is what happens to fuel prices, right? If there's a war in the Middle East, oil prices spike, fuel goes through the roof, and GB can't absorb those ups and downs in terms of the fluctuation of fuel price, which is obviously a major contributor to their cost of producing electricity. So the idea behind the fuel clause is to take that highly volatile rate cost that's beyond their control and make it an adjustable based on what the monthly costs are. But unfortunately, when you try and reconstruct that number, when you try as a consumer to figure out how does this actually correlate with fuel prices, it seems that a lot of other, let's call it inefficiency or operational expenses of GB are buried in that fuel clause. I think they need to make the fuel clause really only about fuel prices and make it transparent. And really that people can follow and say, okay, this is really only based on fluctuations of fuel and there's no other nonsense that's added into it.
Well, you couldn't recreate the cost, the arithmetic behind the fuel clause if you tried. I,
You can't. If
right.
you try,
You
I've
can't.
tried,
You can't. It's
right?
not.
Because they put in costs like I think they put in, so don't hold me to it, but I think some of the electricity cost that goes towards electricity, water production. I think some of the electricity that they use in their plant. There's some things in there that are sort of built into the fuel clause, as I understand it. So it makes it a really complicated formula. And I think that's also what you're seeing in that audit report that was done, that's been redacted and sent to Parliament, is that it's not predictable. It's not transparent. And I think that's where GB needs to start, is really make that fuel clause transparent. Your efficiency, your operational expenses need to be in your base rate. And that's it.
Well, it's really quite simple. I would much rather have them tell me, every month, here's the cost. You know what? The cost per kilowatt hour is X, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it goes up, it goes up. And if it goes down, it goes down. But whatever the fuel costs you, it should cost you. And stop all of this horrible
But if they do
calculation.
that, there's no transparency also. So they need to have a base rate, a
Mm.
fixed base rate, and then fluctuates only when fuel prices go up or
Yeah,
down. And that's it.
yeah.
And that
And
base rate needs to be investigated and agreed upon and signed off by government, and otherwise only fuel fluctuates up and down as
and
as a,
the-
as a as a cost.
and the title of their statement from the supervisory board, begins with those words: restoring trust requires truth and transparency. And if we can't figure out the numbers, guess
Right.
what? There is no transparency. So then, by definition, the notion of restoring trust just not going to happen.
Right.
So, um, Emil, I can't thank you enough
No,
for,
as always, enjoy it.
and we'll look forward to next week. St. Martin Insights, news that matters to you.
And this weekend, stay safe. We
Yeah.
expect hopefully no winds, but probably some rain.
Rain, and I suspect we'll see some sargassum on the south side when the winds kind of turn around and blow out of that direction.
Maybe it'll take it out to sea. I hope.
From your mouth to God's ears. From your mouth to God's ears. It is just 9 o'clock. Your full marine and tropical weather update. An update on Tropical Storm Erin is on the way. Please stay with us. More fresh air in the morning is coming up.